Well, good morning and welcome to our Cybersecurity Summit in Seoul, Korea. It is my honor and my pleasure to have time with you this morning. If you have a tough time understanding me, I suggest you put the little thing in your ear. If you want me to slow down, just say slow down, and I'll slow down. I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes or so with you to talk about some ideas about cybersecurity. You know, cybersecurity has become very interesting in the last few years. 10 years ago, we thought it was fine. The world was fine. Technology hadn't moved that much. There were no big problems with security. And yet today, we know that cybersecurity has become a very important topic. Now, when things get difficult, human beings tend to do one of two things. Some human beings, they like things being difficult, and they take the challenge, and they do something about it. Many human beings, unfortunately, do not do that, and they give up. There's nothing I can do. I have been breached. Too bad for me. Well, I don't want to be in that category. When we started Palo Alto Networks about 10 years ago, we said we don't want to be in the category of people that give up, and we don't think the world should give up on security. We don't think you should give up on security. Instead, we believed that there was a number of things that we could do as a company and as a society to make the digital world safe again. And I'm going to run you through those ideas. And some of this is technology, but some of it is also a very strong belief that if we do things right together, we can stand up against our common enemy, the cyber criminal. Now, in today's world, it is very hard to figure out what is good and what is bad. The picture behind me is that of a self-driving car. You can see this. The passengers aren't looking in the direction of traffic. They're watching TV, they're playing games. The car will drive itself. Now, is this a dream or is this reality? Well, this is reality. Technically, this can be done. However, there are major security issues with a world that looks like this. Because for this to happen, lots and lots of data has to go to the car, has to come from the car, right, including lots of data about the passengers of the car. So, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's great for energy consumption. It is great for humanity. We will spend less time on the road. We will burn less fuel. There will be no traffic jams, not even in Seoul, Korea. I know you like your traffic jams, but they can all be avoided if we have this technology. All good things. However, if somebody were able to get into the data and compromise the car, or even know where the passengers are, that's not a good thing. So fundamentally, the technology that we're trying to make safe here is good. It's good technology, and if we use it right, it can have an enormously positive impact on society, unless things go wrong. And that's the trouble we're having, unless things go wrong. So we like these technologies. Society has said, we want these cars. Now, what is going to make these cars safe? How are we going to make these cars safe? Or drones. About a year ago, at the World Economic Forum, an idea was brought forward. And the idea was that we are in the fourth industrial revolution, meaning we have blended information technology and physical technology together. It is very hard to discern what is physical and what is digital. These two worlds have completely blended. Right? That wasn't the case 10 years ago. Digital was digital and physical was physical. But today, everything is a thing that collects data and that receives data. And then based on what we collect and what we receive, we can do all kinds of things. We can inject insulin automatically. We can send drones into places where no human beings can ever go. Now, that's a good thing, right? But remember where drones came from. Drones were espionage technology. So you think about this, what is going to make this safe and secure? It's hard to understand. Is that the responsibility of the manufacturer of the drone? Perhaps. Is it the responsibility of the consumer? Probably not. But who's responsible? The government? Well, most people don't want the government to have anything to do with this. So what is going to make this safe? Well, ultimately, that's a combination of what we, as a society, want to happen, and the technology that can enforce the security of these technologies. And it is early days. It is very early days. And people haven't really figured out what is good and what is bad. I am sure that some of you have a Samsung watch or an Apple watch. I'm sure some of you have that. The Apple Watch and the Samsung watch have a technology that measures your heart rate, your steps, can approximate your consumption of energy, and therefore is a medical device. Oh, by the way, it also tells the time, but that is not very interesting, because anything can tell the time. When you have an Apple Watch or a Samsung watch, you're carrying a medical device. The data from that medical device has very interesting data for an insurance company. Imagine that based on that data, your medical premium goes up or down. Apple measures, or Samsung measures, that because of your heart rate, because of your steps, your consumption of calories and so forth, you live a very, very healthy lifestyle. And therefore, you should pay less premium than somebody who doesn't walk around, who doesn't consume any calories or anything. Now, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? People don't know at this point. People find this scary, because what else could they possibly do with the data? Who else could they sell it to? So society hasn't figured out whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. And as long as society hasn't figured it out, there have to be controls in place that can prevent any misuse of the information. Same with that car. Imagine this for 2 seconds. The telemetry in the car can tell an insurance company whether you're a good driver or a bad driver. And based on that behavior, make your insurance premiums go up or go down. This is the problem we're having in the industry right now. The industry doesn't really know how to assess whether you're a good or a bad driver. Now, of course, when you have an accident, they know that you have been a bad driver, but it's very hard for them to predict that you're a good driver or a bad driver. But what if on a constant basis they could see that? Would be wonderful. Imagine this, you drive really well, you're never too close, there's always distance between you and the other cars. Shouldn't you pay less insurance premium? Well, of course. But what else could they do with the data? And this is what society hasn't figured out. The technology is way ahead of society at this point. which I think makes our job very interesting. Very interesting at this point. The problem that we're dealing with, though, is that from a control perspective, from what we have developed to secure things, things look terrible. Now, this is an exaggeration. This isn't your IT department. At least, not quite. You know, in IT, we have a really weird way of doing things. I'll be the first to admit, and I've been in IT my entire life. We have a very weird way of dealing with things. Every time we see a new problem, we buy a new thing to deal with the problem. We're not trying to extend what we already have to deal with a problem. No, we're just buying something new again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Now, why is it a problem? Well, one is we make a fundamentally wrong assumption to begin with. And the fundamentally wrong assumption to begin with is that we believe that somehow these technologies are going to work together. Somehow the people at Cisco and Microsoft and Oracle and Juniper and all of these, somehow they have decided that all of these technologies are going to work together. Well, I can tell you that did not happen. Those companies did not have some kind of secret meeting in which they determined that all of these technologies are going to work together. And since many of you, I'm sure, are engineers, when you're trying to put things together that were never designed to work together, you're in trouble. How do you make those things at least seem that they work together? Right? You tie a little piece of string around it and you think it works together, but it doesn't really work together. The other thing is that oftentimes one technology tells you one thing and one technology tells you something else. One technology says, that thing, that's not good. There's something wrong here. And the other technology says, no, it's fine. It is absolutely fine. So not only do you have to engineer products together that were never designed to engineer together, you now have to make a judgment call between what those products give you in terms of information. And that's a terrible position to be in. This is unsustainable. Also, because this is not what we are up against these days. It turns out that in cyber, our adversaries, the people attacking us, are highly organized, are highly instrumented, are highly automated. And so their way to attack us is based on their understanding how badly organized we are. So that needs to be addressed. There have to be ideas how to make this more predictable, how to make this more automated. Now, one argument that I keep on hearing around the world is, yeah, it's not as bad as it used to be with these breaches. And, you know, maybe not to the journalists that write the headlines for the big newspapers. Maybe it isn't as sexy anymore to write about breaches. But the reality is there are many, many, many breaches. And I'll give you a few examples of companies you may have heard of. Oracle. Oracle got breached this year in a major way. Now, you may have heard of a company, right, that is called Yahoo. You may not use it that much because you probably have a much better portal than Yahoo. Anybody has a much better portal than Yahoo these days. But Yahoo, right, got compromised. In fact, we now know for sure that the US elections that were held last month were breached, for sure. This is not stopping. So whether you are a retailer or a high-tech company or a government agency or anything else, it won't slow down. Now, the slowdown is one thing, but what is going to help you diminish the amount of successful attacks? I'm not here to tell you that somehow there will be fewer attacks on you. And by the way, there's nothing I can do or any other company in the world can do to diminish the amount of attacks that are trying to get to you. Impossible. There's nothing we can do. What we can do, though, is diminish the amount of successful attacks and bring that down to near zero. That we can work on. That is the goal. Now, threat, as it turns out, is not only an equal opportunity provider in that it tries to get to everybody, right? It is also highly innovative. Who would have thought that a month ago, by attacking consumer video cameras, right, you could bring down the biggest DNS infrastructure in the world? Who would have thought? Hypothetically, we thought about that. Hypothetically, we said, what if somebody can bring all of these technologies together, right, to attack something else? It was hypothetical. It had never happened. And then it did. Right? So think about it. There is massive amount of innovation going on the attacker's side in a very organized way. That is what we're up against. As you saw from the video when we opened, this is no longer a thing that is just in our hands. Virtually all of the governments in the world have stood up and said, this is a matter of national security. Cyber is part of our national security, which means it is effectively becoming what we call the fourth theater. It turns out that more than technology is needed to make cyber a matter of national security. So major countries around the world are now not only taking a hard stance on the crime itself by giving very high penalties to cyber criminals, they're also writing a lot of law to disclose cyber incidents. You know, 5 years ago, you could have thought that there were very few breaches in the world because we didn't hear so much about it. That wasn't because they didn't happen. That was because there was no law in the countries where that happened that said, if a breach happens and if personal information gets exposed, you have to tell your consumers or your customers what happened. Today, the majority of civilized countries have written laws that mandate disclosure. Today, the majority of countries in the civilized world have laws for cyber criminals that punish those criminals the same way as they punish traditional criminals. Not so long ago, in the US, if you were to walk into a bank with a plastic gun, pretending to be a bank robber, and steal $5, your penalty for that was 10 times worse than you stealing 10 million credit card numbers from a retailer. Because you actually could get away with that. Imagine that. It was completely disconnected. The reality of the impact of the cyber crime, right, and the punishment. The last thing that the US and many countries have now agreed upon is to share threat information. Our common enemy, right, is very organized. Now, from that we can learn. Right? And I always take the example in Korea. Right? LG is a commercial enemy of Samsung. It's hard to argue they're not. But they have a common enemy, right, in cybercrime. And I believe it is in the best interest of Korea and Korean companies if those businesses and the government collaborate together against common cyber criminals. That's a good thing. It's a big hurdle because politically that is not obvious. It's an important part of our thought. Even in the US, as in Korea, right, we have started to figure out that in our military, in our governments, cyber is something that is real. 10 years ago, this was not very obvious. In many efforts, we thought of traditional enemies that would use traditional ways of espionage to infiltrate our countries. Today, most sophisticated government organizations have built what we call a fourth domain or a fourth theater. In fact, the US government now believes that cyber is a more risky theater than land, air, or water. So in fact, cyber defense gets more money than the Army, the Air Force, or the Navy. It's serious. Now for you, as representatives of businesses in the room, you also know that your boards in many countries are now personally liable for cybercrime. That's tough. As a board member myself, it's tough. Because while I am responsible, I may not always be able to do something about it. So what boards are doing today is setting very high priority on measures that organizations have to take to prevent cybercrime. Now, their number one motivation, of course, is economic loss due to the breach. That can be reputational loss. If a company that relies on security to manage the data of its consumers, or its patients, or its students gets breached, that could have catastrophic effect on that company. If a company has intellectual property in medical or electronic research, what have you, and that gets compromised, that could have catastrophic effects. Boards care a lot about that. And because boards care, we have to do something about it. We can't pretend that Korea somehow is different, that what I talk about will never happen in Korea because there's nothing interesting in Korea. The cyber criminals will just go around Korea. Not the case. The other thing that is not true is that it is just North Korea. Right? Don't for one second believe that your only natural enemy here, right, in the war of cyber is North Korea. Are they a power? For sure. Are they the only ones? Absolutely not. You have way too much intellectual property in this country just for the North Koreans to pursue. Now, why are we in this situation? As I said before, the last 10 years have been the most active years in the history of technology. And it is accelerating. 10 years ago, only 10 years ago, right, companies like Aruba had virtually zero appeal because we didn't live in a wireless world 10 years ago. 10 years ago, in fact, Apple had just introduced the iPhone, and the iPad didn't even exist. 10 years ago, Amazon, the only thing they sold were books. Today, they are one of the 3 largest IT companies in the world that does more than $10 billion in revenues from their Amazon Web Services alone. Less than 10 years ago, right, Data centers were not virtualized. VMware was still predominantly a desktop product for engineers. All of this happened in the last 10 years ago, and the security technology that we used to protect it all was invented years before. That became an opportunity for cyber criminals. That is why we have to rethink what we do. We can't just say, oh, wait a minute, I solved this problem 10 years ago, I'm fine. Look at everything that came onto your networks, came into your organization, technology-wise and so forth. You have to do something. You can't just rely on what you did even 5 years ago. The challenges have a lot to do with the way that technology is pushing us in general, in a good and a bad way. So one of the great things is that we're blending physical and cyber. That's a good thing. We can do many, many things, right, so that we consume less energy, have fewer accidents, have fewer heart attacks, have fewer diabetic crises, have all of these. We can avoid many, many, many problems because we can blend physical and cyber. But as I said, there can be many issues with that as well. Data is massively aggregated. I always jokingly said, I'm a database guy. I spent half my career at Oracle. I was responsible for Oracle's database marketing for many, many years. I always used to say, 10 years ago, if you were a hacker and you would be able to penetrate Samsung, you know how many databases, different databases Samsung had? You could actually help Samsung make sense of all their databases because it was a mess. The data was a mess. In the last few years, what has Samsung done? What has everybody else done? They've put it all logically together. So today, when I walk in as a cyber criminal, it's all ready. I don't have to do any third searches. It's all pre-aggregated for me. It's wonderful. Now, for Samsung, it's wonderful. They can do things they could never, ever dream of. Right? By knowing more things about their customers, about their suppliers, everything. But it also gave the attacker a unique opportunity to extract all that information. And lastly, compute power is virtually limitless. Just as an example, 5 years ago, it cost society $100 million to sequence the human genome. $100 million. Today, Amazon can sequence the human genome for less than $1,500 of compute. $1,500. So $100 million to $1,500. There is nothing that you can't calculate. Nothing. That's a good thing. We can simulate a million things a million times, right, over millions of hours. There will be an answer, the best answer. The problem is that's also what the attackers can use. They can use that very same benefit to attack us. They can spin around threats a million times. They can have a million variations of the same threat launch against you, and it will cost them nothing. And therein lie the challenges. And of course, we also know we're not quite done yet. I keep on hearing this, oh, this problem will go away soon. Soon, this problem will go away because somehow the cyber criminals will just give up. Well, if you look at it right now, to the cyber criminals, it looks like we have given up. The industry has given up. Right? It's not the other way around. Good. Now, in all of this, and just like with many other problems, an original idea matters. It matters what you believe in, because once you believe in something, you're going to build something that will deliver on that belief. 10 years ago, when we started, we had a very firm belief. And the belief was, it is mathematically possible to stop an attack. If we use compute power, if we use data, if we use a technology that can both see and regulate, in as many places as possible, we have a shot at stopping an attack. It is shocking how many security technologies exist today that aren't capable of stopping things. They will tell you things. They will tell you something is wrong. Oftentimes they disagree on what's right and what's wrong, but they will tell you, and then humans have to drive. Well, unfortunately, there aren't enough humans in the world to do this. No matter how many humans you find, right, they're not there. This has to be automated. So our firm belief was not only do we want to use data and do we want to use compute power and do we want to use enforcing technology, it all had to be automated. The human factor had to be taken out. And that was controversial. But here we are. Here we are, 10 years later, and that idea has come into fruition. This was different than most others. It's a mathematical problem. 10 years ago, there was another common idea, which is companies should hire hackers. The problem is, hackers don't want to work for companies. It doesn't work that way. Because if they were to work for companies, right, then somehow that company is going to make them more rich than being a hacker, more subversive. I don't think that was a very smart idea, but many people thought, oh, you should have a red team and a blue team, and you should do all these things yourself. Well, no. That's not going to stop anything. Right? We thought it was a mathematical problem. We said, if we can reverse this, which is, it has become incredibly cheap for an attacker to attack anyone. My example of the human genome was on purpose. From $100 million to $1,500. If I want to attack Visa, you know who Visa is. If I want to attack Visa today, what would it take me financially to do that on my own? Well, I would have to buy some kind of kit from some kind of very shady website. $30. $10 more if I want technical support. That's the reality. Now, I have to find compute power to start calculating variations, thousands, millions, and then ramp up enough capacity, right, of clean DNS, clean domain, to go attack Visa. Where do I find that? Amazon. And so guess what? Right? And I don't have to it run for hours, because within minutes, Amazon will figure out that they're part of enabling an attack. But I can do this for a few $100s. I can potentially bring down Visa, their website, or worse, for a few $100s. It doesn't take a cell in China or North Korea, right, to do this to any Korean company. It's a few $100s. So I cannot prevent that, because there will still be lots of people that spend a few $100s trying to attack you. So that's not the answer, because I can go to the source. I have to do something else. I have to make it excessively expensive to them for that attack to be successful. Because then the economy doesn't work. Right? If I can attack Visa for a few $100s and gain thousands of dollars doing it, then great, I win. If I have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars attacking a company and I make no money, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go somewhere else, perhaps. So turning this around is a very, very important phenomenon. Not easy. But this was our belief, that we can build a system that is able to turn this math around. Now, to do that, three things have to happen. One is we have to push for prevention, and I'll explain what that means. The second thing is that we need to share. Nobody alone can do this. Not us, not you, not the Korean government. There is massive sharing needed. Because remember, this gets better and better the more data we have to build the defense. And finally, education. Because unfortunately, for those who don't believe, right, they will actually make our system weaker. It's not that it's only getting weaker for them. No, in fact, the uneducated will and could very well bring the system down. So if we do all this, right, there will be better security. If we will do all this, the complexity of such a system also has to be substantially simpler. Because the enemy here clearly is the cyber attacker, but we oftentimes are our worst enemy as well. We have made it so complex that the system couldn't work technically. That has to be changed. If we do it, right, we actually have much better productivity, i.e. it takes us a lot less time and effort to build the defense, and we actually may end up spending less money on it. Although I would argue that is never the driving factor. I have yet to meet an organization that says, I think I'm going to go for less security because that is cheaper. That's not how it works. And you know, automation has become the friend of folks that do things very differently. Right? If you think about it, Tesla, whose factory this is, became a relevant car company in less than 10 years. That has never happened in the history of the world. That's because it is indeed 100% automated. Right? Now that sounds scary sometimes, but that's what automation can do. Now, the other thing, of course, is if you do it well, right, you start to have measurable results. One of the biggest challenges we have in security is we don't know whether it works or it doesn't. If your boss calls you tomorrow and said, you have spent a year on security, show me, is it better or is it worse? So last year it was 23. What is it now? Is it 25 or is it 21? And forget for 1 second what 21 or 23 or 20. You have no idea what to tell the guy, other than, it feels okay. I think we're better off because we bought stuff. It's very hard to do this. That's because there is no common understanding of security among all these products. Good. Now, to do security right, you need to be highly consistent. Consistent in your policy, consistent in the data you gather, consistent everywhere. And this is the challenge, forcing consistency on everything. So doing that, you need technology, sharing, education, as I said before. So moving away from things that are disconnected, assume certain things, don't gather data, right, to things that are highly correlated, highly instrumented and automated with predictable outcomes. Be ahead of the attack cycle. Don't just run along with it, be ahead of it. Now, that's a great approach. How do you get to a system? And what does the system need to do? Well, first of all, that system has to be natively engineered. Not a collection of stuff that some systems integrator puts together. No, things that are natively engineered. Things that also learn. We call this machine learning or continuous improvement. There is no status quo. The system is always ingesting more data so that it can learn and learn and learn and make better and better and better decisions. Not humans, the system. For that, you need lots of data. And then finally, automation in the reprogramming of the security. So once you know the answer, this is good, that is not, you can automatically put those rules in place. It doesn't need humans to implement the rules. Now, this is non-trivial. Just to give you an example, the data that we as an organization have gathered over the 10 years of our existence is unbelievable in scale and size. So about 1.5 billion indicators of compromise. In fact, there's one number even bigger than this. We have about 800 billion security artifacts in our central threat intelligence. 800 billion. I can tell you, those kinds of numbers, when I was responsible for Oracle's database, were unimaginable. There were no databases of 800 billion anything, or not even 800 million, maybe 80 million. But today, we're 2 orders of magnitude above that, 3 orders of magnitude above that. Even better, it doesn't take us seconds to find whether something is known or unknown. It takes us milliseconds, right, thanks to the amount of compute power we have to look at this data. And so the more data you can analyze at faster rates, the better your judgment becomes. That's called correlation. These are techniques where you continue to write algorithms to find whether something you observe is malicious or benign. Humans cannot do this. Well, they can, but it takes them years, or weeks, or days, not milliseconds. There's nothing that humans can do in milliseconds. Well, they can blink their eyes in milliseconds, but you cannot look at millions and millions of records, or billions of records in milliseconds. Machines can. Very important to keep that in mind. And then, if you do that, you can now not only look at everything, everywhere, but very importantly, apply techniques to stop bad things, to allow good things, and to enforce policy everywhere. And security really has to be done everywhere. If you leave one of these bubbles unattended to, that's going to be a security challenge. So, sharing is the last thing I want to talk about, because sharing is, well, in America we say sharing is caring. It means if I share, it means I care about the others in this system. We believe very strongly that in order to get great, predictable results, we need as much information as possible from anywhere. From our own technology, so that we can turn something unknown into something known very fast. You know, on our networks, on our mobile devices, on our computers, we see lots of unknown things. And as you know, in security, when you see something unknown, there's only one thing you're allowed to do. Stop it. Because why on earth would you let something go through that is unknown? That is an inherent risk. So in this case, what is going to help you determine known versus unknown? Well, that's the beauty of having a very large brain with billions and billions and billions of artifacts. Look at this. So that brain gets filled not only with information we see from our clients, but also from other sources, governments, industry groups, and so forth. Very important. And then automatically reprogram the infrastructure. That's why sharing is important. That's why all of us should be participants in this and recognize that the natural enemy of Samsung in cybercrime is not LG, is not Kia, is not Hyundai, is not POSCO. In fact, we're all up against the same enemy. One example of such sharing is something that we started a few years ago with companies like Fortinet, McAfee, and Symantec, called the Cyber Threat Alliance. Today, there are many more members in the Cyber Threat Alliance. The Cyber Threat Alliance will become an official non-profit organization in the next few weeks. with potentially more than 100 participants, including the leading names in the industry. Because we so much believe in making all of the information available that we can to society to drive the likelihood of a successful attack down. In Korea, that is also happening. That education part is important. Right? We have made lots of efforts to work together with, for example, Kimpo University, on making sure that people both have the awareness of what is going on, but also start to come up with new ideas. As I said, ideas really matter. And we're very proud and very honored that we have this relationship with Kimpo University. We also released our cybersecurity guide here in Korea. You have it in your possession. And this is a guide where we want to make the argument why business leaders should care about cybersecurity. Not just from the perspective of fear. What if? What do I need to do? Right? Is my job at risk? No, more proactive. What tools do I have to help me communicate better, to educate better, but also to automate better? So that guide is in your possession, and please engage with the folks in the room, our employees here in Korea, if you have questions. Because we do believe this will take some time to educate a nation about cybersecurity. So with that, I think we have a very unique setup here in Korea. Korea is a highly automated, a high-tech country that has the good and the bad. Korea believes in many things that we as an organization believe in, and I think the society also believes that we have well entered the digital age. So my ask to you is to participate, is to work with us, use our technology, but also use our principles to make Korea be safe in the digital age. Thank you very much.